is Vic Gatto with the Hellstorm. Today I have a little bit different show. David Serafine wrote a fictional book called Before the Ashes Fall about memory loss, dementia, and Alzheimer's. It's a fictional story, so we can really bring out the emotion and pain around that disease state and the treatment thereof. And I wanted to talk to him about the process of writing the book, and now it's been made into a movie. Sarah Schwab is making this book into a movie. So please watch the Hellstorm. We talk through the book and the movie. It really is interesting and really digs into Alzheimer's. Please watch. Thanks. Okay, welcome everyone to the Hellstorm. Today I have David Serafine and Sarah Schwab. Thanks for doing this, guys. I'm excited to do it.
No, Vic, thank you for having us. Very much appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Very happy to be here.
This is a little bit different show. We're going to talk about a book and upcoming movie called Before the Ashes Fall. And David, just quickly give a little bit of your background, then we'll get to Sarah in a minute, just about your background in general and what led you to write the book.
Sure. I'd love to start that. So I think that I took a rather circuitous route to the landing spot of becoming an author. I was actually a major in criminology in college, and my initial career goal was to become a police officer. So I didn't quite land there, but I did make my way down to North Carolina, ended up working as a security manager for a pharma company down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Began my ascent up the channel from there up to Washington, D.C., and eventually made my way to a Fortune 50 company as a supply chain security manager. At that point, I had the chance to write a couple industry publications and always fell in love with the process of writing itself and wanted to take a crack at a fictional novel as well at some point down the road. And that was actually kind of pushed upon me by circumstance with the topic of dementia that occurred within my family. So I think we could pass it to Sarah for a little bit of her background first, and I can jump back into that.
Yeah, sure. Sarah, how did you come to this project, or how did you meet David?
So I met David on LinkedIn. He approached me about film in general, my film background. And so where that came from, I went to school for English literature and journalism and just had a desire to write. And so I did a lot of editorial writing. When I moved to New York about 12 years ago, I was pretty much just trying to do any kind of writing that I could. I eventually ended up in the theater scene, wrote some plays, had a few wins in there, and in 2016, I eventually got into the film world and worked on my first short film directed by Karen Allen called A Tree, a Rock, a Cloud. I was just part of the production, the set design, and the set dressing and things like that. And I just fell in love with the process of working with a team of people from all various backgrounds coming together to bring about this vision. So to bring something from the page and to put it on camera was just really fascinating for me. And I worked on a bunch of other film projects after that to learn all of the different roles so I could really understand what each department did. Directed my first short film in 2018 and finished writing, directing my first feature this last January, which we just finalized sound mix on Friday. So now the film is complete. Yeah, it's really great. So now it's going to be up on Vimeo and we're going to start submitting to film festivals.
Yeah. Okay, good. So as you all know, this is a healthcare-focused video show. David, talk about Alzheimer's and dementia, how you came to know about the disease, and then sort of how it emerged into this book.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, the process of wanting to write some fictional novel was always there for me, way back when, 2008, 2009 timeframe. But we actually, my wife's family actually had two individuals that came down with dementia symptoms very early on, her mom as well as her grandfather. And so each was diagnosed with a specific disease, one being Alzheimer's, one being temporal frontal dementia. And the interesting part about that was as I watched this process unfold, I was learning about it like a lot of people are, things such as, it's not a normal process of aging to begin forgetting things, to begin wandering, to drive somewhere without knowing where you're going, to leave gas on the range or things like that. So my process of learning was basically watching certain things take place over the course of a year, year and a half, and all the credit in the world to my wife. I mean, it was basically a caretaker in a lot of ways, but things such as learning about how it impacts the overall the financial situation for people that are suffering from it, the relationships from it, and quite honestly, at this point in her mother's progression, her grandfather since died, but in her mother's progression, she was never told that her father had passed, because that's one of those types of things that you wouldn't bring to the table at that far along in the process itself. So what I began to do was to put some notes onto paper. I crafted the particular novel based on 3 individuals. As you mentioned, the healthcare industry, but the memory care facility was one of the individuals that we had in this particular storyline. I had an early onset Alzheimer's patient, because one of the things that we learned during this process is there is no specific age by which people can have Alzheimer's. So you can have somebody that looks pretty healthy, be 60 years old, and because of certain lifestyle choices, actually exacerbate, almost act like a catalyst to Alzheimer's and bring that on. So
yeah, and it's more sad, to me at least, when the person is physically younger and often in better shape, just because they're going to likely live a long time, although their mental capacity is framed or not doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think from that perspective, it's a very insidious disease. It kind of lurks beneath the surface. It's a quote unquote normal part of aging, which it's not whatsoever, but it's been sort of tucked away like that. And so when I saw more and more things happening, you learn from the doctors, you learn from researching that is not a normal part of aging. And there are certain things that we can do in the front end to mitigate the overall progress of Alzheimer's. So I took a memory care facility individual as one of the characters as well. So they had a perspective of what they're dealing with Alzheimer's care. And then finally, dementia was an overarching character in and of itself. So pretty heavy book, but my goal was to raise awareness with empathy, awareness with the characters themselves, and tell a good story.
Yeah. And so talk to me about the process of writing the book. How long did it take, and when was it published?
So published in late 2017, and I think that I probably will make a lot of people shudder, at least a lot of authors shudder, that and Sarah has a much better perspective on this, having read the book and then also adapted this to film. But my process is probably a little atypical. I go very high conceptual. I begin writing and sort of back my way into the story itself. So I think a lot of folks are very good about putting the actual outline together, top to bottom. They structure it like that. I don't necessarily follow that same format. I like to be, hey, this is the concept I'd like to focus on. Here are the characters I like to put into it and see what happens when I start writing. So the process took about 6 months for me to write it.
You just start writing the story, and then the outline emerges almost from what happens with the characters. Is that fair?
Yeah, Again, I think authors will shudder at this, but you have pantsers and plotters. I am not a plotter by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a pantser. So I'll put something down and try to start writing and see what comes. And that's how the story sort of progresses on its own.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, Sarah, what's the process like of taking this book and then making it into a screenplay and thinking about how it would be projected onto a movie format?
So that's a great question. It's always wonderful when you have fantastic material to work with, and David is a beautiful artist and a beautiful writer, and his imagination is just, it's so beautiful and full. And so there's just a lot that I had to work with when I was thinking about how this would look on the screen. And as David said, he's not necessarily like a structured writer. I'm definitely much more of a structured writer. I have a format that I like to follow when I'm writing a new screenplay. I like to hit beats at certain pages, and I can mess with that down the line. But with the filmmaking process, especially being a director as well, there's so much chaos all the time. So it's like you kind of need a map. I need a map. And then you can deviate when necessary. But so with David's piece, there was just so much so much to pull from. And I wrote 3 different drafts, and this is going to be kind of a fluid story that we're going to continue to work on up to the day that we probably shoot it, and even then after that. But what really resonated with me were these 3 characters, and the way that when I'm adapting somebody else's material into a screenplay, I like to think about what films it makes me feel and think of. And in this case, David's story really made me think about the 2004 movie Crash that was written and directed by Paul Higgis. And that story also is an ensemble piece, and it revolves around the racial and social injustices in LA. And it was an amazing, amazing movie. And I just kept thinking about that movie. And so when I started the process of writing, I read the screenplay, I watched that movie, and I was like, how can I do what Paul Higgis did with David's script, and yet still keep it David's voice, keep it my voice, and do our own thing with it. Yeah. So that was really the jumping off point for me.
Okay, interesting. So one of the reasons I wanted to pull you all into the Health Storm, which normally talks about health innovation and health-related issues, is that I think particularly Alzheimer's and dementia, but a lot of health issues are hard to understand from the outside. Like if you don't have a relative or a loved one with dementia, you can see a news program or you can read an article, kind of a journal article that is factual about how it works. And it is clinically accurate, but it doesn't bring like the real emotional, the real impact of the disease home. And it strikes me that, or I wanted to explore the idea that, David, you could take a fictional work and really like pull the reader into a better understanding. Do you think that's fair? Were you able to do that?
I mean, in my perspective, yes, and it's more of a roman à clef type of novel, meaning I'm looking at things that have happened, I'm observing it, so I'm taking things that are based on reality and writing a fictional novel with it. But I think that, from my perspective, the one reason why I wanted to afford the 3 different characters and their perspectives on dementia is they're very different. If you've got a memory care advocate, they have a perspective that I would never have. If you have somebody suffering from it, they have a perspective towards dementia that you don't have unless you're suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's. If you've got a dementia itself, I mean, a character out of that as far as what that looks like from its perspective. So for me, I tried to create a story that gave a very visual, I'm a uniquely visual writer. I try to be a uniquely visual writer. I think that's where Sarah comes into play, being able to put these things onto film and get a perspective. But I want to draw the empathy. I want to see sympathy. I want to have a brutal candor with the disease. And I think this is one of the things that Sarah and I talked about back and forth was I want it to be hard. I want it to be what it is. I don't want a necessarily soft feel to it because it is not soft. There's nothing soft about the disease, the progression of it, relationships, finances, things like that. So I try to convey all aspects of the disease from different perspectives to get that.
Yeah, so the 3 characters you're talking about, there's the patient, the person with dementia, the memory care worker, and then the disease itself ends up being the 3rd character. How does it come out in the book?
So there's actually 4 characters. Dementia is the 4th, but there's an early onset Alzheimer's patient. There's a father who he hadn't seen for 4 decades. It's a veteran at a memory care in a veterans clinic, a hospital. And then there's a memory care advocate named Cafferty. And so by a stroke of fate, the father and son reunite. And there's an interesting part with dementia that you sort of regress back into a childhood state, basically. You lose certain ability to do certain things. And things that are uniquely childlike, for instance, tying your shoes, riding a bike, things like that. The father's trying to reconnect before it's too late to teach one thing with his son that he hadn't had the opportunity to teach in a very long time. So the memory care facility plays a part in getting these guys together and kind of reintroducing that relationship before it is too late.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And so what is your hope that when you wrote the book, we're going to get to the movie in a minute, but with the book, what was the thought of what the audience might take away from it?
I think the thought, well, again, I'm going to go back to the same thing, the brutal candor and nature of it. So I think that you can Google and look a lot of different books or a couple movies that are based on dementia, tremendous movies, tremendous perspective. I think this is different from the standpoint that I want it to be, again, I want it to be more candid, more visual from my perspective of what it looks like. It's more difficult, in my opinion, for Sarah's job to adapt that and put that in something super cool and the highly visual part where I may take something that a person is thinking and spend 5 pages on that particular labyrinth in their mind of what they're thinking, why they feel a certain way, and so on and so forth. So for me, and she could probably speak better this than I can, reading and adapting it, but I think there was a highly visual perspective of I want them to feel it, I want them to sympathize with it, empathize with, and at the end of it, question and want to learn more about it. What can we do? Who do we reach out to? I wanted that conversation to come up from the book itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that the brain in general, and dementia in particular, in this case, we know the least about neurology and the brain. It really is a black box to us. Like we see the symptoms coming out, and we can try to make the symptoms less bad, but if you have a problem with your knee or a problem with your heart or any other part of the body, medicine knows much better how to fix the source of the problem. Where in any of the brain aspects, but dementia certainly fits into this. There's not clarity on really what is at the root of the problem. We're just sort of at the surface level trying to deal with it.
Yeah, and it can impact any portion of the brain. I think that a lot of life choices, some that are chosen, I should say, but some that are not. So as an example, PTSD can be something that is a catalyst to dementia later on. So an example is if somebody suffered something very traumatic, they didn't get the right health engagement early enough on, that can come back to act as a catalyst to dementia later in life. Abuses, lifestyle choices, my diet, my nutrition, that impacts a number of other health issues as well, but equally so, things such as dementia. So there are a number of things on awareness standpoint that can be done with things such as telehealth. I can learn more about that now remotely than I otherwise would not necessarily know about other than just researching on my own. Yeah. So this is an opportunity for that going forward.
Yeah, interesting. So Sarah, talk to me about the tools and techniques sort of at your disposal to take this work, which, as David said and you mentioned, has a lot of visual imagery in it. What are the tools that you plan to sort of bring that to the screen?
Well, the beautiful thing about film is that you have so many tools at your disposal. You're not just there with a pen and paper. You have the visual element of the camera and the actual lens to capture a scene. You have a beautiful array of actors that can tap into the souls of each of these characters so that we can really understand the human element and the human despair when each of these characters are going through what they're going through and their individual perspectives. Once you capture all of that, you have the editing process that can really just put it all together and do some really smart cutting of the film, color correction, music after that, and then the final sound mixing stages of it where you can add all sorts of noises and subliminal sounds, and there's just so many elements of filmmaking that I love that can make David's story pop and to bring his more surreal moments out in a way, just in a really special way. So, I just intend to use at my disposal that I just listed to do that.
Yeah. What do you expect to be the most powerful scene as it moves into the visual medium?
So there are 3 words that David kept bringing up when we were discussing his book, and that is redemption, forgiveness, and love. And I loved that David felt and feels so connected to those words, and that his characters embody those words and go through a catharsis in their own way as they're moving through their journey together and separately. And so I think that I Yeah, they're such beautifully flawed characters, like any of us. We're all flawed human beings. So bringing that out at the very end, I would say the last scene is going to be the most beautiful scene, because all of these characters who have gone through hell and high water in their own way, not that we're going to tie the story up with a bow, but I think that those three words, redemption, forgiveness, and love, are going to be examined in a really nuanced way. So I don't want to give it away, because I want people to read the book, and I certainly want them to see the movie when it's done. But yeah, it's the last scene.
Yeah. Okay. David, you agree with that it sort of builds to crescendo at the last scene?
Sarah said it much better than I could. So yeah, I think the last scene was the part where it all kind of came together for me, and it made sense, and it had a nice logical ending. It wasn't bowed, wrapped up in a bow, but it was what I felt to be, that was the redemptive aspect. So yeah, I think that was it.
Okay, excellent. Well, so I think you both know the hellstorm that I talk about, we really are trying to describe this hurricane-like force that's barreling in and really has now come to the healthcare industry as an analogy for the disruption and the pain and job loss and changes that are going to happen in the establishment. So in hospitals, insurance companies, the existing kind of healthcare system is going through a significant storm of change right now, and that's going to be hard. But also it will open up kind of open areas or green fields for new things to spread up, like maybe new memory care and new approaches to the delivery of care. And so like a storm in nature, you need to prepare for it, I think, and prepare yourself, prepare your career, prepare your portfolio maybe. I'm an investor, so prepare your portfolio for the winds that are coming. But then, it's kind of a healthy thing too. It will wash through, and then there'll be like an open space for new opportunities. So that's what we talk about in these episodes. And there's really 4 drivers that I want to just mention that are driving, sort of fueling this storm, and just get your feedback on, because I think a lot of them apply to kind of what we're seeing in memory care now. And so the first is really changes in technologies, advances in technologies, allowing earlier diagnostics or better care, more connected care. David, you mentioned telehealth. That's certainly one, but there's also artificial intelligence, where maybe you can begin spotting things earlier to help with diagnostics. I don't know that it's perfect today, but it's getting better, and that's a trend that we're seeing. The next is the rise of the consumer. So individual people are not relying on kind of the traditional white man in a white doctor coat telling them what to do. They are grabbing control of their own healthcare and trying to read books like yours, David, and pull in information and watch videos like the Hellstorm and try to understand for themselves. And then, of course, the doctors and healthcare workers are important partners in this, but consumers are sort of rising up and taking charge of their own health. The third is care moving kind of out of the hospital, the sort of decomposition of the hospital. It used to be 50 years ago that all care was done in this big building called a hospital. And now we're seeing care moving out to the neighborhood and the home. And the last is market entry, so new people coming in and sort of taking care of people, delivering care that are not traditional hospitals, right? So like Walmart has clinics open, and Apple and Amazon and Google are all getting into the space. And so that is disruptive, but it is also healthy. And they're putting pressure on the incumbents in a way that's going to end up in a better service. So those are the 4 kind of drivers of this storm that I analyze in these videos. And I want to just get y'all's thoughts about that, kind of from an outside point of view, but then also how do they fit in with this story? How do they fit in with Alzheimer's, do you think?
Well, I think from my perspective, anything that gives the consumer more options, any opportunity to do things differently or to learn differently, something that is more accessible I think is always good in my eyes as it relates to the healthcare. I think even from the standpoint of take COVID. COVID is a perfect example. Nobody saw it coming, but a lot of folks are now relying on that at least the initial telehealth. Hey, I've got these specific symptoms. What do I do about it? And they can kind of root cause diagnostic things earlier on and differently than what we've had before with a queue out the door with certain things taking place right now. So I think from a competitive standpoint, I think from an accessibility to a practitioner standpoint, all of that is very good. And quite frankly, use the word disruptive technology is in my eyes a good thing. It's a positive thing in this circumstance going forward. So yeah, I think that for me it's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good example where COVID happened, and for safety reasons, we needed to do telemedicine, right? But my view is that once I've seen, and I've done this, once I've seen my doctor on video and gotten treatment, I don't want to go back. Like, okay, COVID will ebb out and we will have a vaccine and I don't know if it's 3 months or 6 months or whatever from now. I still don't want to go park on a 8-story parking deck and navigate way through the hospital and wait with a bunch of sick people for 45 minutes, even if they don't have COVID, to see a doctor for 7 minutes. Like I think the telemedicine worked very well, and we're not going back from that.
I completely agree. And we've got a small diagnostic clinic in my neighborhood now, so I don't have to go to the major hospitals or things of that nature. In fact, I haven't been to one in 7 years from that standpoint, so it's been good.
Yeah.
And from a creative standpoint, I think this idea of accessibility, one of my major goals with creating the film is talking with David and like, what are these very small signs that you might not even think about, that you might not notice, and how can I represent that and show that to people so that they just understand there are small little things that aren't necessarily normal, that aren't a part of aging. And so bringing that to the screen and bringing that to theaters, bringing that to people's homes in a creative way is my part to also help people kind of understand the disease and how to, maybe they should go talk to somebody, whatever means that is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think it's also true that, I think people learn a lot through entertainment, right? So like they may really enjoy watching this film, and they also will learn a lot about Alzheimer's and memory care and the progression of the disease, and maybe they're monitoring themselves or their loved ones. Maybe they want to give money or give time or seek a career in that space. There's lots of ways that it could make an impact. And if it's a moving story, an entertaining movie, you might teach a lot more people about Alzheimer's and all these things and have a bigger impact than if it was sort of purely educational.
Absolutely. And I think getting to the emotional heart of these characters and their journeys, I think is the way to really reach people on a macro kind of level. They can relate to these people, maybe not personally, but maybe somebody in their family or maybe a friend or something like that. Yeah. So that is just really tapping into the human experience, I think, is ultimately my goal with this piece.
Yeah, excellent. And so, David, the book and the movie is called Before the Ashes Fall. The book is available now. So tell people how they can learn more about the book and the movie and follow this and get involved.
Sure, yeah. The book is available on Amazon. So you can simply go to Amazon, hit Before the Ashes Fall, and the book will come right up. It's got some nice reviews that are written there. Obviously, those folks that have read it love to have the feedback and the review on that. That's one of the things that I always encourage people to do. So I think from that standpoint, that's a nice landing spot. From the standpoint of the film, we just received the Fiscal sponsorship last Friday, as it was.
Oh, wow.
So from that standpoint,
so the funding is fully done now. Yeah.
No, it means that we now, and Sarah, you're probably better equipped to speak to that because it's my first time through it.
So Fiscal sponsorship, it's through the Film Collaborative. Basically what that means is that we can accept tax-deductible donations for the film. Even though we do have this Fiscal sponsorship, we can also take investments because of the social message attached to it. So we have both of these platforms where we can fund the movie. And so we have that website up. We are currently working on our website for the film as we speak. And that should be up very soon as well. And people can go there for all of our information.
Okay, great. So the website is being put together right now. And as we come out with this video, or I may update it later, we will get people the link to the website so they can find more and donate a lot of money to it.
The website, yeah, the website for sure, and also LinkedIn. LinkedIn, Sarah T. Schwab on LinkedIn, David Serafine on LinkedIn. That's the best landing spot because everything that we're talking about right now, of course, it's public. It's all over the place, but you can see what the questions are. You can see who's actually engaging in the discussion. You can see the sheer breadth of the disease itself by who's commenting. And they're very personal stories coming out there. So LinkedIn is a great spot to land on as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you both for doing this. I'm excited to see the movie, and it's been great educational thing to talk about. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bill.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Sarah. Appreciate it. Okay, bye.